Hey guys, well, Brian Gute addressed the media a couple days ago, and I just want to chat about it. We always have to kind of read between the lines. He's not going to give up too much, but I think a few of the things that he had to say were kind of interesting to me. This is the Out of Breath Arm Store Packer Minute, the show where I walk around the neighborhood talking about the Packers, and you watch to see if I get flamed out by a Firebird. Gute entering in just a couple of days his very first NFL draft as GM of the Green Bay Packers. He's got some advantages coming into this draft that I think are important. Number one, he's got a ton of draft picks. You can thank Ted Thompson for that, or you can hate on Ted Thompson for letting free agents go that gave us the comp picks that amounted to 12 picks in this year's draft. But either way, but be that as it may, Brian Gute comes into a fairly decent situation in terms of being able to stand pat. Not only does he have pick numbers, but he also, it's not just quantity, but we also have a lot of quality because we're able to come first off the board in the 4th and 5th with the swap with the Browns, and we're picking at 14. Of course, that due to our position last season. And he's in a pretty good spot. And I'm going to add to that, again, I'm kind of giving a nod, and I think Gutekunst finally did in this press conference. He talked more about Thompson and how much he appreciated him, how much he learned from him. But Ted Thompson is also going to be in the room. And Ted Thompson and Gutekunst talked about that. The fact that he will have a chance to lean on Ted. Ted's been there before. He's a calming presence anyway. And I really like the presence that Brian Gutekunst brings to the table as well. Let me just jump across the street here. We've seen Brian Gutekunst be fairly unafraid to go out, get a Mo Wilkerson, snag Jimmy Graham, and also be unafraid to make really, really tough decisions right out of the gate, i.e. this is going to be the first no Jordy Nelson team in like 9 years. But he also has a calming presence, much like Ted Thompson, and I think this guy could be a very good GM. He's definitely in the right GM tree. We'll see what happens in terms of aggression. Aggressiveness is probably a better way to say it. Aggressiveness or passiveness. Either way, though, I think the Packers can have a good draft. I think they can. I don't think they necessarily have to reach to be over aggressive in a draft that I don't have a lot of faith in at the top, or I guess in the first round, I'll say. However, the rumors are flying, and Gutekunst talked about it. You know, the smoke and mirrors are getting amped up now as we head into today is Tuesday, and Thursday evening, this draft kicks off. So the questions were, of course, asked about moving up, moving back. There have been rumors of the Packers perhaps being interested in using some of the picks that they have to trade back up into the second to pick at 14 and then find someone to trade back up into the first, and snag a second pick out of the first round, much like they did when they picked B.J. Raji and Clay Matthews. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I do think that is I actually don't hate it, but I would, without knowing who's going to be on the board, it'd be very tough for me to trade out in a draft that I think has most of its value in the middle rounds, like from the second round on, and not so much after you get out of the top, say 10 or 12 or dozen, to then spend capital that's valuable to get one pick that lands back up in the top. However, I think the Packers, if they see somebody they like still on the board, they may be interested in doing so. Okay, well, that's just a general statement. However, what are we looking at if we stand pat at 14? I think Gutekunst, I don't know if he gave something away. He's pretty tight-lipped also, like Ted Thompson was. But he was asked the question, which is just really a rhetorical question. Which is more important, edge rushers, getting the quarterback, or protection on the backside? These two things work together. We've talked about the dynamic between those two in the past. They all work together, and Gute was fairly fair-handed in mentioning that, basically, that there are teams that had a fantastic pass rush but were weaker in the defensive backfield and were still able to be successful. There are teams that don't have as good a pass rush, but their defensive backfield is so strong that they can still be successful. But then he said this. I'm interested in what you guys think. He said it is harder the big guys are harder to find. There's less of the big guys. Big guys are harder to find. And that, to me, is a reflection of Ted Thompson and Mike McCarthy always saying you can never have too many big guys. Now, if I'm going to read between the lines, which we have to do, I don't have any choice. He's not going to tell us who he's interested in. If we read between the lines, and some of the discussion in the press conference had to do with the size of the cornerbacks in this year's draft. There aren't as many longer cornerbacks that really fit into the Packers' their protocol, their prototypical cornerback. And you've got guys like Denzel Ward even in there that may not quite be what the Packers are looking for. And the statement that Gute made about the big guys are harder to find makes me think the Packers at 14, or particularly if they trade up, are going to be going pass rusher first. That's my leaning right now. And again, I'm reading between the lines. I don't know any more than anybody else does. Brian Gutekunst doesn't know who he's going to pick because he doesn't know who's going to be on the board at 14 either. But that statement to me was a little bit telling. I thought it was interesting. I thought I'd mention it to you guys and see what you think, because I know there are some in the community that don't want that want cornerback right off the bat. We've got to have that defensive backfield depth. And you guys have a point, because we lost Demarius Randall. We've got, we did bring in Tramon Williams. We signed House back, which makes me much more confident in where we're at. Quentin Rollins presumably will be able to play, will be healtly as a second-round pick. But I can see people saying, listen, we've got to protect. In a passing league, we've got to protect. And our passing defense has been abysmal, which of course then goes directly to the question of, does it have to do with the interplay between the rush not getting there fast enough and the defensive backfield not being stout enough or not being skilled enough? So we could go round and round and round, but I did think it was interesting. Gutekunst mentioned the big guys are harder to find, and we'll see what happens in a couple days. I do think it's worth talking a little bit about the state of the defense. I think this might be a defense-heavy draft for the Packers. I do believe we definitely have to be paying attention to wide receiver and the O-line. The right side of our offensive line is a huge question mark in my mind right now. However, I expect there may be we may work on getting that defense stout. Aaron Rodgers talked about it, how you need to have that good defense. It's really been our Achilles heel to some extent. Obviously, our Achilles heel last year was, Aaron Rodgers going down and having to play Brett Hundley in there, who just wasn't up to the task. He kind of barely got us within range of maybe being able to pull it off once Aaron Rodgers came back for the Carolina game, but that didn't work out for us. And we've got a Clay Matthews, he's getting up there. There are those that say he's washed up. I completely disagree with that. Nick Perry, I watched some Bosarowski highlights of Nick Perry. Man, I hope Nick Perry can stay healthy. He can be dominant at times. But the main thing for me on defense is this team is going to have, I think, a three-headed monster up front when they're all on the field together in Mo Wilkerson, Mike Daniels, and Kenny Clark. Now, they're going to be rotating these guys to a great extent. But, guys like Mo Wilkerson playing from the interior of the defensive line and being a double-digit sack guy, Wilkerson on a scale of 1 to 10 coming out was like an 8 to 9. This year, probably Bradley Chubb is closest, and he's probably like a 7.5. Wilkerson is a beast, and he has not lost it. And he's going to, and I think Spofford was talking about it on Packers Unscripted. He's got a chip on his shoulder. He's got something to prove, and so does Jimmy Graham. So the interior of that line, D-line, looks really, really good. And that's not even talking about, because we can't forget Montravius Adams, who is going to be a second-year player, fully healthy. He's got to learn the Pettin defense. But Montravius Adams was getting some props in training camp last year before he got hurt. And Skinny Jeans Dean is still in there. Really came on as a very good player, but in particular that interior line is going to be, I think, fantastic. I cannot wait to see what they can do. I really can't. And you know Mike Daniels is stoked to have another Jersey boy on that line, and he and Kenny and Mo are going to mess some people up. Which, by the way, I'm going to pat myself on the back for a moment, because Wes Hotquitz and Mike Spofford, they did their Packers Unscripted. I highly recommend it. I love that podcast. They came back. They'd been gone for a couple months. And they mentioned that the shortest distance to the quarterback is through the middle of the defensive line. And so I am going to pat myself on the back for a minute, because I said that months ago. I said when we signed Mo Wilkerson, I've been saying for probably over a year now, it's the flip side of Mike McCarthy talking about the shortest way to the end zone is through the middle of the field. And so the shortest way to a quarterback is through the interior of the defensive line, right through the middle of the field. So it was just funny to hear it, you know. But anyway, we've talked about that a lot this offseason, partly because the quarterbacks are talking about it. You got elite quarterbacks saying, you know, the thing that I really have trouble adjusting to is pressure up the middle. And we saw Matt Ryan, we talked about that a couple years back when we had to play the Falcons, the need to get that pressure up the middle. And with that D-line, I think we're going to be able to do that. Now, with that said, we've got to get, again, your edge rushers are in there. We don't know what we've got yet in Vince Beagle. And I think Blake Martinez could have, I mean, his last year, you got to call a breakout year. I mean, tied for the league lead in tackles, I think, by the time the dust cleared on 2017. Just Machinez earning his name. And now I've been calling for, now that Pettin is there, and Martinez loves Mike Pettin so far. He loves the idea of accountability. You know, he's a smart player. I want to see him develop as a pass rusher with that interior line and a little stunting going on. Once the chemistry develops between Mike Daniels, Kenny Clark, and Mo Wilkerson, I think there's some real possibility, especially if a guy like Vince Beagle or, you know, say Kyler Fackrell comes on, Reggie Gilbert, and can play the outside linebacker position. You could bump Clay Matthews then inside, and I think we could really be onto something here. They've already said they're going to move Matthews around. We've already seen Matthews play at a Pro Bowl level as a inside linebacker, and you can't help but be excited we get an edge rusher that can plug and play. So you got the draft coming up. We pick at 14. There is the possibility that we end up with an edge rusher that can get out there and play first year. This is the argument I made earlier. It's a little bit simplistic, but we heard Ahmad Brooks talk about it last season. It's a little easier if you're brand new, or in this case, like let's say we draft a rookie edge rusher. It's a little easier to tell a guy, just beat the guy in front of you and try and go after the quarterback, than it is to plug and play a guy like Kevin King coming in and playing against elite wide receivers like Julio Jones right off the bat. That can be very, very difficult, and it's a little bit easier, even though on Pettin's defense, everybody's responsible to know everybody's role. They're going to be responsible for taking care of business so that they don't have trickle-down problems like we did last year. But at any rate, if we find a way to have an edge rush and kick Clay Matthews to the middle, or we pick up an inside linebacker that can rush the passer, add him to Blake Martinez, and our base 3-4 could be pretty outstanding. let's talk for just a second. Probably should close the show with this. I guess it's, I don't know how long it's getting, 12 minutes, whatever. About Kevin King, because we talked about, House is back, Tramon Williams. I think Kevin King is going to benefit a ton from Tramon Williams being on this team. Tramon Williams knows just about all there is to know. There's nothing he hasn't seen. And basically, there's nothing he hasn't done. And Kevin King is going to get a major boost. I'm hopeful that Quentin Rollins, or one of these other young corners, will come on as well. Because I do see the Packers picking up a cornerback, if not two, in this year's draft. But I'm looking at corner, depending on who's available at 14, but I'm looking more to the mid-rounds to pick up a value cornerback that might really turn out to be a fairly good prospect. But Tramon Williams was an undrafted free agent, if I remember right. So, and what did he play for us? 8 years, 9 years. Had a nice little tip away in Super Bowl 45. Kind of a little bit of a game-changing, game-ending play. So he's back. I'm sure he's not as athletic as he was, but he had a great year last year, and he's veteran savvy. And he has not, maybe he's not quite the same player, but he's still a pretty good player, or he wouldn't have the year he had last year. So I guess I will close it up for today. I know this may have been kind of rambling and not very well organized, but I do want to talk about Brian Gute. I was listening to his press conference with great interest. I'll probably listen to it again. And I'm interested in what you guys are thinking about. What do you think about edge rush versus cornerback? Or do you think the Packers pick some other position at 14? Do you think we trade? If so, do you think we trade up? Do you think we trade back? Do you think we try to position ourselves in where we can pick at 14, trade back up into the first? Do we stockpile picks and move back because that's where the value's at? Very interested in your thoughts and excited that, guys, we're going to see the real deal here in just a couple days. I can't wait for it. I'll let you go for now. And until next time, I'll be back on again really soon. I'm planning actually probably to do like a video a day. So if you haven't, I got time to make up for, but we're through that period where there's really nothing to talk about too. Even Mike and Wes were gone. There's nothing really to talk about. However, I do appreciate all of our patrons, and we love you guys. We're trying to make up a little lost time and get the value back up where it needs to be for you guys. So we really do appreciate you, and I'll be doing tons of videos right now. All right, so we'll talk to you again soon. Go Pack.
Packer Nation worldwide.